Hello everyone, welcome to the Mystic Path. We're gonna have a little chit chat about the new moon in Libra that is happening on October 16th. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. This is the second out of 3 supermoons this fall, and there was one in September, there's one now, and then there's another one in the middle of November. So, what does supermoon even mean? Supermoon means that it's just orbiting closer to the Earth than it normally does. That's all it means. And so the energies flowing in to the planet might be a little bit more intense because the moon is closer, right? So new moons are usually about kind of like, they have really good energy for starting new projects, new relationships, both business and love. But this one's a little unique because we have a Mars retrograde thrown in there, which will add a little tension. And it's going to push us to really find our balance. It's going to push us to reflect, revisit, and plan. Okay? So those are 3 good words to use for this new moon. Reflect, revisit, and plan. Right? So this is a really good time to kind of review, right? Reflect on your life and revisit and review past victories, past failures. And, don't overthink them. Don't get caught up in overthinking. But definitely you want to do some reflection and trying to better understand your patterns, right? Because the best way to find a path forward that's successful is by revisiting and reflecting on our past. Now, you got to be careful with that though, because some people get like obsessed and they get stuck in their past, and then it holds them back from moving forward, right? So we don't want that. We just want to be able to kind of look back at our relationships, both business and love and family and friendships, all relationships. New moons are about all relationships, not just love relationships. And, we kind of want to, those words again, they keep sending them to me. Reflect, revisit, plan. Because what we're going to want to do is reflect and kind of revisit some of maybe the mistakes we made or the successes we had. And then we're going to want to integrate anything that worked and let go of anything that didn't, right? And then that's how we find that balance inside. We take with us the lessons we've learned that helped move us forward and make us successful, and we leave behind the things that may be blocking us or keeping us from moving forward or keeping us stuck or keeping us in feelings that we shouldn't be sitting in, right? Like anger and hate and disharmony and stress and anxiety and depression. So I just want us to remember that, because the energies that come in with a new moon kind of support the planet in taking action and starting new projects and building new habits, right? So before we can do that though, we really do need to kind of like revisit our habits and our patterns and kind of look at them and see like what's serving me and what's hurting me. Because whether we want to admit it or not, we're all humans. All humans are flawed, all of them. And we all make mistakes. And sometimes we have to, learn from those mistakes, not beat ourselves up, not get stuck or overthink them, but learn, okay, what can I do differently so that when I start this new project or build this new habit or new relationship, I won't hit that same stumbling block, right? Because what do they say? What do they say? I guess the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? And we as humans tend to do that a lot. So, so I just kind of wanted to have a little chit chat about what the energies we're bringing in. And I thought we'd just pull one card of advice from Source Energy. But before I do that, I want to kind of give you guys some prompts that may help you evaluate and reflect on, that stuff. So these are some kind of good prompts when we're doing this kind of work to kind of investigate ourselves and our patterns and our behaviors and how we can take accountability, right? Because I feel like there's some other astrological stuff going on right now with Saturn and Pluto and some other planets, and those energies are supportive of taking accountability. So I wanted to give us these prompts to kind of help us so we can find that path forward, right? And then we can use all these energies to our benefit and create a new path forward that might work better for us in whatever the situation is, right? So here are a couple of things you can do. Ask yourself, like, if you've had any collaborations in business in the past, recent past, okay? I'm not talking like a million years ago. You can ask yourself, like, what were my successes in that collaboration and what were my failures? What mistakes did I make that either made me stumble, let's just say, so that's a really good prompt. Like, look at the collaborations you've had in your life, and it doesn't have to be just in business. It can also be in your friendships and your family relationships and your love relationships. Like, when the need for collaboration arises, how do you react to that, right? Like, ask yourself these questions. Are you open to collaboration, or are you somebody who's like really rigid and you are like, I have a plan, I have a goal, I'm gonna follow it to the T, and listen, it's not bad or good to be these things. I'm going to use myself as an example. In the past, I was raised in a family of a bunch of control freaks. And so, surprisingly, or not so, I then became an adult who was kind of a control freak. And I was always trying to control everything and plan it out to the minute and to the detail so that it would all go as planned and I would feel comforted that the plan would execute and everything would work out, right? But, the older I get, the more I've learned to let go, because I've realized that control, like that over planning and over executing and trying to control every detail and control every employee and all of that, it really was hurting me more than it was helping me. Because it was making me feel like I had a sense of control over my life. But, as we all know, you don't really have a control over your life. You do to an extent. You can make choices that are best for you and that will lead you to the most positive outcomes, right? But even making those choices, you don't know for sure what the outcome's going to be. And you can't control for sure what the outcome is going to be, right? Like, I can't tell you the number of times in work that, I'd have all of these finely tuned plans and I'd spent weeks on them and researching and collaborating with other departments and, making sure. And then when the day came, something threw a wrench in it. Like, I'll just, like, raining. Let's just use raining as an example. it's a golf event outside and then it was raining. Well, you cannot control that. So then all of those finely laid plans, had to be adjusted, because if you can't adapt and adjust, you're not going to be successful, right? So, what I'm saying is we need to start asking ourselves and looking at our patterns and looking at, like, do we try to control things too much? Do we not control things enough? Are we, the opposite, where we just go bouncing through life and, like, take no responsibilities for any of our actions or things that happen to us? Here's an example. Somebody who, I know someone who really just goes with the flow, which is a great quality to have, but it can also be to your detriment, right? She goes with the flow to the point of, I don't feel like doing that today. I don't feel like it. It's not in my flow, so I'm not going to do it. And then she does that a lot. So then what happens is, the day something needs to be done, like the day the client's expecting it, or the day, let's just use taxes are a good example, the day the taxes are due, then there's this frantic, like, anguish and anxiety and stress in her life because there was no plan, right? She was taking responsibility for nothing. So it's like going to the controlling everything and being a control freak, that's a problem. And then going completely the other direction to just going with the flow and flying by the seat of your pants, that's also a problem, right? Our goal is we want to land somewhere in the middle and try to operate from that balanced place where we can balance both of those energies. Don't get too controlling, don't get too lax, because being lax can also cause you issues, right? Just like controlling things too much. And let me tell you from experience, when you control things too much or try to control things too much, the people around you don't like that so much. So then you have other issues that arise in your relationships that you have to deal with because you're too rigid. Okay? So that, again, these are just examples I'm using. So take it if it resonates, leave it if it doesn't. If you feel like it applies to you in some way, great. But, that's a great thing we can ask ourselves is, like, how are we when we collaborate with other people? Are we flexible? Are we too flexible? Do we let them walk all over us? Or are we too rigid to where we don't let anybody else have opinions because our plan is the only plan, right? So that's a really good question to ask yourself. How are we when we collaborate with people? How are our behaviors? Do you see patterns there? Another really great question to ask yourself when doing this kind of work is, in my life, am I compassionate and understanding and fair to the people around me? Or am I the opposite of that? What I was just talking about. Am I somebody that's like a dictator who is like, this is how things are going to be, and I'm not going to accept any other way, and I'm not going to be able to cope if it's not my way, right? I actually, we talk a lot about how our outer life is a reflection of how we feel on the inside. Well, years ago, when I was such a control freak, I married another control freak. And yeah, you guys are probably laughing, thinking that couldn't have worked out well. Well, of course, it did not work out well. And that's because, when you have two people that are super rigid and nobody wants to compromise and nobody wants to see the other person's point of view, like, yeah, that's not going to go very well after a while. And that's not going to be a space that you're going to feel good in. So, again, we need to ask ourselves, when we're collaborating in any relationship, are we being compassionate and understanding of the people in the collaboration? Or are we being rigid and dictatory? Because, nobody wants to hang out with a dictator, right? So again, balance, right? And then the last thing I just wanted to say is that another good question would be, in our past collaborations and relationships, are we overlooking anything? Are we paying so close attention to these little finite details? Like, here's another example, like, I'll use my ex-husband. He had this thing where, like, he wanted the remote control on the same table all the time, so that's where it was, and everybody knew that's where it was. But that's just not realistic, right? When you live in a house full of people. So he would get so focused on that detail that then he couldn't even see that, like, I was accommodating him in other ways, right? It was like all or nothing. It was like, if this remote isn't on this table, then you don't take any of my feelings into consideration, which is an extreme thought, right? It's taking things to the extreme. So that's why I wanted to say another really good question to ask ourselves is, are we getting caught up in the details? Because that's like an illusion. I just kind of want to point this out. I'm a former control freak, okay? So I'm a recovered control freak. And I want to say from experience, what I've learned after years of therapy and doing inner work on myself, like we're talking about, I started to understand that those controlling mechanisms I was using, it was an illusion. It was giving me an illusion of comfort, that if I control all these things, my life is going to be happy and balanced and everything's going to go smoothly. And although that may work for a little while, it does not work for the long term. I'm here to tell you, okay? Take it from me, recovering control freak. Those things really can cause us more problems than they're helping us. And sometimes we don't even realize how caught up we get in details of things. And then it's like you miss the beautiful big picture because this detail's wrong, right? Like I always used to say to him, we've had a wonderful night, we just watched a good movie, we had a good dinner, whatever, and you missed all of that joy because you're still so focused on where the remote control is or is not, right? So that's just what I want you guys to keep in mind in this new moon is self-reflection is going to be paramount for the next couple weeks. And I feel like we're really being called to dig deep into our psyche and start trying to transform our relationships with the people around us, and not just our relationships with the people around us, okay? I feel like this also needs to be said. Society as a whole right now, globally, is, I'm sure you've all noticed, is off the chain, okay? Like literally the world is burning. And figuratively as well, right? So I feel like while we're doing all this self-reflection on our relationships and collaborations, we also need to look at our relationships with bigger concepts, okay? Like what are our relationships with power and authority? What are our relationships with materialism and consumerism, right? Because these are the things that are really killing us as humans, I feel like. Society is in chaos because humans have really unhealthy relationships with all those things I just mentioned. Really unhealthy relationships with power, with authority, with money, with materialism, with commercialism. So I feel like while we're doing some of this deep work and we're asking ourselves those questions I was mentioning, we need to also be kind of looking at the big picture and asking ourselves, like, and taking accountability. Like, who do we want to be when we show up in this world? What do we believe? What is worth standing up for and fighting for, and what is not? Because I feel like right now there are a lot of things worth standing up for. Do not get me wrong. There are a lot of things that need to change in the world. Systematic racism, right? Obsession with money and status, abuse of power. These are all things that really need transformation. But transformation won't come until we can really start asking ourselves these hard questions, like, who do I want to be when I show up in the world? And we really need to start taking accountability for our existence. Are we contributing to these unhealthy societal patterns? And if we are, what small changes can we make to start to try to change those relationships and change those dynamics, right? Because, you know, I've said this before on this channel, Jennifer McKinney, giving her a shout out. She is a yogi, and she is also a student like myself. She does a lot of self-reflection, and because of that, a lot of growth comes, right? And so she always says, small steps make big change, right? And so I feel like that's really applies right now. Is even the smallest changes, you know, we can make in ourselves, if everybody does that, right, globally, then that moves the needle just a little bit. Then we become just a little bit better. So, you know, I challenge all of you to kind of do that. I'm going to leave you with that. They're telling me pull a card. So I'm going to leave you with that. I just wanted to kind of put that thought out there and get people thinking, like, we need to all start taking personal responsibility for ourselves and our issues, and we need to start handling them and healing them. And we also need to take accountability on a larger scale for how we're existing in the world. Okay? So, food for thought. And then let's pull this card and just see, what is the universe advice for this new moon? Okay. Grounding. This is a good one. Okay? Grounding. So, this is a good one. And in case anybody is interested, that deck is the secret language of light. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I feel like the message coming in from the universe is, during this new moon, while we're doing all this self-reflection and trying to understand ourselves and our patterns and our behaviors, that can be overwhelming. You know, it's not easy to face ourselves. It's not easy to face that sometimes we make mistakes and sometimes we make bad choices. And, you know, that can get really overwhelming. And then when you get overwhelmed, that can spin you out of control into depression or anxiety or panic, you know. So that's why grounding is going to be so important, right? So there are lots of ways we can ground ourselves. We can walk outside barefoot. We can sit under a shade tree with our back up against the tree, right? There are lots of beliefs out there that trees have a lot of healing energy and healing properties, and can, like, share their energy with animals and humans that touch them and sit on them and live in them, right? In a healthy, balanced way. So, you know, that's just one example, a couple examples. Another good way to ground, if you're suffering from like an anxiety attack and or a panic attack and you're really having trouble, you can close your eyes, take deep breaths, right? In the nose, out the mouth. And then once you feel calm enough, you can open your eyes and start naming the things around you, right? Like right now, I see a pine cone, I see a dove, I see a candle. These are things that will help ground you in your current present situation. and help the, anxiety and panic from getting out of control. I like to use gratitude to ground me when I start feeling out of control, or I start feeling those, because we all get them, those negative thoughts and feelings that can trigger my depression. I ground myself in gratitude. I start listing off the things that I'm grateful for. Even if it's the simplest things, like I'm really grateful for the coffee this morning because it was pumpkin flavored. I'm really grateful for my cats. I'm really grateful for my friendships, right? So those are all really good things that can help you ground. I've also found yoga to be a very grounding experience for me. So again, these are all things that work for me that I do. But definitely listen to your intuition and sit quietly with yourself. Create that space of calm and sit quietly with yourself, and then ask yourself some of these questions I talked about. And if you are getting overwhelmed and you need grounding, a sign you need grounding is that, you're feeling overwhelmed, or you're feeling anxious, or you're feeling negative, right? Sit down, close your eyes, get quiet for like 5 minutes. Listen, because if you ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? Your intuition will tell you. And sometimes it's as simple as water. Sometimes it's as simple as movement. Get out in nature, right? So, okay, I'm going to wrap this up for our little new moon chit chat. I hope that stuff was helpful. And let's not forget, use our grounding as a tool to help us through all this deep, deep self-reflection. Okay? I'm wishing you guys lots of love and light. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or week or weekend. And namaste.